Welcome to SBME Interfaces. Our goal with this show is to introduce you to the people that interface with biomedical engineering, from students and faculty to staff and industry, and everyone in between. BME is a broad field that encompasses so many different perspectives, journeys, skill sets, and backgrounds, and we are excited to share them all with you.
We're very excited today to be interfacing with Lynn Raymond. She's the director of the Djavad Mowafaghian Centre for Brain Health, a clinical director of the Center for Huntington Disease, professor in the Department of Psychiatry, Louise A. Brown Chair in Neuroscience, and as well as an associate member in the School of Bioengineering. She did her undergrad in chemistry at the University of Rochester and an MD PhD at Albert Einstein College of Medicine. She's a clinician scientist, so I don't know when she finds time to rest and sleep, but investigating with her team the pathogenic mechanisms of Huntington disease, as well as glutamate receptor structure function, modulation signaling. Her work bridges foundational science and clinical research. She's a holder of numerous awards, and the one I picked out is the Killam Teaching Prize from UBC, because I always think that's special when you are a great teacher and a motivator. So welcome, Lynn.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So we've started this way with most of our guests. So I'd like to ask you, how has the last 13, 14 months impacted both your work and that of the Center for Brain Health?
Yeah, you would have thought that we would have lost a lot of time. So I guess for my work, for the first couple of months, it was just on pause. No one going into the lab. We didn't have any clinic visits arranged. And then we slowly kind of realized that this is not going to be short. And so we just shifted to online. And so for clinical medicine, it's been a game changer. We used to have the occasional telehealth visit, and now a lot of our visits are on Zoom, and we don't even need any particular technology. Our patients have it, and they're really happy to be seeing us from all over the province and not having to travel. So that's different. Clinical trials, which I'm also part of, is harder. As neurologists, we usually need to score the neurologic exam really in person, but we're now piloting, I don't mean personally, but as a group for the Huntington study group of clinicians across North America, ways that we can do this online as well, or even have wearables. The participant has wearables, they have diaries, they have phones that they can interact with, and also just tell us how they're doing at home. And then the lab, so I also do foundational research on animal models of Huntington disease. So we had a major setback, but I think we're back to, close to 75% activity. And the other thing is that although we're not acquiring data at the rate we used to, which is we need to be in the lab and actually doing experiments, pretty much everyone in my group has really upgraded their data analysis skills. They now know all about open science platforms, and they're sharing data. Slack is, we're all using that, even me. I wasn't at all. But all of these, they've learned sophisticated analytical methods for bigger data. We're doing more in vivo and imaging, and developing, writing our own code and things like that to analyze data, which nobody had time for before. So they just did it like the old-fashioned way. And so I think that's been actually a silver lining from COVID.
That's great. Yeah, hopefully some of these changes we've adopted will continue, because I think they are, as you say, game changes.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Djavad Mowafaghian Centre for Brain Health and your role as director?
Sure. So the Djavad Mowafaghian Centre for Brain Health opened its doors in 2014, so it's about 7 years. But leading up to that, we had we were called the Brain Research Center, and it's still, even though we have a building that's beautiful and new called the Djavad Mowafaghian Centre for Brain Health, many of our labs are also in UBC Hospital and elsewhere on campus. We have members in other buildings, other departments, in the SBME, the School for Biomedical Engineering, the Life Sciences Institute at Children's, and even at UVic and SFU. So we consider ourselves kind of a virtual center in a way. We bridge clinical and foundational. So that's something unique about the Center for Brain Health, is that we have clinics in the building, and so we have clinical experts doing clinical trials and observational studies in the same building, where we have people using cell or animal models to examine mechanisms of neurologic disease, neurologic and psychiatric disease. And I guess the big challenge is how to bring those two together and have more interaction between them and really develop meaningful collaboration. So some of that happened before I started, but that is one of my primary goals in my term, is to look at ways we can come together more and find ways to collaborate, and really, because that's the way we can translate things back and forth. The observations in the clinic may come back to the lab saying, maybe you could look at this pathway or this molecule, and vice versa. We also, supporting that work is the Borglund Brain and DNA Bank, which again was a generous donation from the Borglund family, was established at the same time as the building opened. And so we're collecting biospecimens from our patients that are being investigated in various ways by the foundational scientists. We are really strong in neuroimaging, and that's both human and in animal models. I think we consider ourselves one of the leaders in Canada, both from the point of view of developing new protocols in MRI imaging to really get at what's happening on the myelin level, for example, in multiple sclerosis and other diseases, to how to look at brain circuits in animal models of disease, or even in the normal state. How do these different parts of the brain interact to sense and perceive the environment, as well as control movement, and supporting that. We have the Dynamic Brain Circuits Cluster, which has been funded through the Vice President for Research and Innovation Office for the last 4 years, and now for 2 more years, led by Tim Murphy. So I think, those are some of our strengths, and the foundation for bridging the translational gap in the brain, which is a huge challenge, more so than in some other areas like cancer, I think.
A question, this is sort of a personal area of interest for me on that subject, is, I've heard the last sort of 2 decades been considered, as like the 2 decades of neuroscience and advancement in neuroscience. Mm-hmm. Have you seen that? Is there any particular like lines of inquiry that you're really excited about on that front?
So I think 2 things come to mind. One is the absolute revolution we've had in understanding, like being able to visualize how the brain is working on a circuit level rather than cell by cell in an awake sort of behaving animal, or and also on the human level as well. We have better ways of analyzing that data in a functional MRI. But on the animal level, because of optogenetics and these new tools that we have that we can either activate particular types of neurons in particular areas of the brain, or put a probe in that fluoresces, we shine light in it. It increases fluorescence when the neuron's more active or less active. So that's been a revolution, just in understanding. So now we can look at more complex behaviors and relate them to which sets of neurons are actually participating in which circuits, and what part of the cortex is talking to what part of, say, the brainstem or the basal ganglia. And then on the clinical level, I think just as a neurologist, what strikes me is we've had a real revolution in understanding the immune system's role in neurologic disease. I just came off service, and half the patients seem to have an immune-mediated mechanism of the disease, of the clinical presentation, and some of them are really quite severely affected by seizures or paralysis from spinal cord lesions or brain lesions. So we understood that in multiple sclerosis for many years, that the immune system interacted and was something that could be targeted. And so that probably is way ahead of other neurologic diseases. But now we see that it's involved in many other disorders, movement disorders, epilepsy especially. And we also know it has impact on mental health. So people are looking at the gut microbiome and how that interacts, but just the, inflammation, stress, and all of those things and how they interact with the brain. I think that's just wide open still, and it's going to, bring us new targets and advances in caring for people with brain disorders.
Great. So we've already partnered the School of Biomedical Engineering with the center, and so your perspective, what excites you about the School of Biomedical Engineering?
Yeah, well, I think I guess another big thing that's changed in neuroscience that I touched on before is the fact that we used to look at individual molecules, synapses where the neurons communicate, the touch point for communication. So we can look at that electrically, sometimes chemically, but we were always sort of looking at it cell by cell. And now we're looking at, as I said, in a multiplex way, a multimodal way, and on a larger scale. And most neuroscientists that trained when I did are not ready for that. The newer people kind of are, but we need to be way more educated in, computer science or data analytics, AI, all of these things in order. That is going to be what helps us better understand the brain. We can't do it, a cell by cell basis. So I think that's where there's lots of opportunity for neuroscientists to talk to engineers and people who are much more savvy about computer technology and analytics. Another thing is just analyzing both human and animal behavior. And that's something that we've partnered with the Murphy Lab for the animal behavior to develop ways to do that more automatically instead of having, typically people would take animals out of their home cage and have them run through various tasks and put them back, and they're stressed and they're handled, and and all of that interferes with the behavior that you're measuring. So instead, there are now ways of designing the cage to the animal sort of just does this as part of their going about their business. They'll go through certain tests that can be quantified and measured in an automated way with things like Raspberry Pis and really cheap cameras. And we've published open source, and so is the Murphy Lab is a leader in this in terms of people can just build it themselves and not spend a lot of money on it. And going back to the immune system, it's key there too, because if you really want to test how the immune system is impacting a disease, for example, you don't want to have humans coming in all the time with all their germs and kind of changing what the animals are exposed to. So I think that field is really happy about it too. And that's another thing that we can partner with the School of Biomedical Engineering, obviously, just some of these new technological breakthroughs that help us analyze things. Same with the data at the human level.
Great.
Like wearable sensors is a big one. And I know that you're quite a few of your faculty that are engineers are interested in that.
Absolutely.
Speaking of that, so I want to get just a little bit more personal here. What drew you to pursue Huntington disease, out of curiosity?
It's just a convergence of opportunities. It wasn't something I'd always had on my radar. I trained in neurology, and then I thought, well, what am I going to specialize in? And I liked movement disorders, but that was mainly Parkinson's disease because that's common. And so I trained with the movement disorders group at Johns Hopkins, where I did my residency. And then I had the opportunity to come to UBC, and they didn't need anyone. They didn't need any additions to their group of Parkinson neurologists. And then Michael Hayden, who is a really world-renowned specialist in Huntington disease, said, "Oh, I'd love a neurologist," because he's a medical geneticist. Why don't we get together and make a clinic, and we can do research. And so I just took that opportunity. And the other link to Huntington's that drew me was there was an old hypothesis that overactivation of glutamate receptors had something to do with the fact that the striatum was so vulnerable in Huntington disease, especially NMDA type glutamate receptors. And as a basic science project, for my postdoc, I was working on the newly kind of cloned and sequenced glutamate receptors and their function and how they're modulated. So that was kind of a natural thing to bridge with Huntington's models.
That's great. You touched on this, and it's also apparent if you just do a little bit digging that UBC has a strong presence in neuroscience and brain health and so forth. What factors do you think led to us being here today as being sort of a well-known entity in that area?
Sorry, what led to?
What factors? I mean, is it just good recruits over the years, investment of funding? Why do you think you're sort of building a cluster of excellence around neuroscience and brain health and whatnot in general?
I have to say, UBC was not well known for neuroscience when I got here, which was sort of mid-90s. It was pretty small and a bit scattered. We didn't have, there's still no neuroscience department. So there's no way to sort of bring people together. They were in just different departments, and different departments had different priorities. So they might or might not hire a neuroscientist. Max Senator was the key, honestly. And I guess the dean had a vision about, well, the brain research is important in the late 90s. Let's develop a center. We do have a bunch of people who do neuroscience research. And so Max took it over, and he really built it up. So that was one thing. He had a great vision. He recruited quite a lot of excellent people and raised a lot of funds through his connections and his great personality for raising money. And I'd say the other thing that helped UBC and Canada in general was the funding increases that we saw in the really the early 2000s, CRCs, and just more money for grants. The CFI allowed us to really compete for recruits from the US, where it used to be anyone in Canada who was doing well would go to the US instead of staying in Canada, because there just weren't many opportunities.
You talk about that, about UBC and neuroscience and sort of thing. UBC is launching a neuroscience undergrad program. So can you speak? Yeah, can you speak to that a little bit, and what you hope its future impact to be?
Yeah, so I haven't been personally very involved in that. Tim O'Connor, Vanessa Auld, Jane Roskams, and some others really led that effort, and have been working on it for more than a decade. And I think it's past due, because if you really even want to go to high school students and get them excited about the brain, but if we don't bring people here as undergrads because there's an undergrad program in neuroscience, we're going to be losing out on a lot of excellent students who are going to say, oh, well, there's a dedicated program at Calgary or McGill or Toronto. So they'll go there, and then they might be more likely to stay there. If we have it at UBC, we bring in people from all over, and they see, they have opportunities to participate in research here, and then they want to stay, and they see, how well we're doing. I think it's a key feeder mechanism for excellent graduate students, and also undergrads are just they're wonderful because they're minds are wide open. They don't accept what we think is, oh, it's this way, and they always question things. So I think that's really important for research in any area. And it also just, again, kind of rounds out our whole effort in neuroscience. And hopefully the next step will be, we'll have a school for neuroscience, like the School of Biomedical Engineering.
Absolutely.
Happy to give advice on that. But also the genesis of the School of BME was partly similar to create this pipeline, from undergrad to grad.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. What are some of the sort of your leadership principles that you value and that you've used throughout, especially a difficult year like past year and just now being a director of the center?
All right, I guess I didn't touch on that one when you said, how did COVID? I took over March 1st, 2020.
Oh.
So I was actually director for 2 weeks when everything shut down. And again, I thought, well, how are we going to make progress? How are we going to raise our profile and let people know we're doing things? But it actually, again, everybody turned to Zoom, and in some ways it was easier to have meetings with people because they weren't flying everywhere, and we didn't have to do it in person. And we needed to do a lot of groundwork for this center that had not yet been done, like develop a really comprehensive strategic plan. It wasn't as if there was no strategic planning, but it wasn't a full, published strategic plan with a lot of input from the members. So Shernaz Bamji, the associate director, and I put a lot of work in on that. And again, it was not as hard as it could have been if we were not in COVID, because people were available. We had a lot of small group meetings, we had town halls, we had faculty retreat that pretty much everybody was available to attend. So we really got a lot of input. What else? But I think what we're lacking, of course, is some face-to-face, and a faculty retreat by Zoom it's okay, and you get stuff out of it. You get input for your strategic plan, but it doesn't create quite the same excitement and collaboration potential that if we were able to meet in person and show off posters and talk to each other over appetizers or whatever. I think we're missing that. So it's been hard. But one other thing that, again, was a silver lining, because we couldn't bring our external speakers in, most of them didn't. They wanted to postpone until they could actually come in person. So all the ones we'd lined up for 2020, 21 bailed and said, no, tell me when you're accepting people from outside to come to Vancouver, because they want to come. They obviously like the idea of coming to Vancouver. So that meant we had a lot of empty slots. And at the same time, people told us, we don't even know what our own members are doing. We have over 100 members. They're scattered, across Vancouver and the campus in many different areas, and clinical, basic, whatever. So again, we pivoted to more internal talks. Some of them were around a theme where we have 3 faculty members having 15 minutes each on related topics, just clinical and foundational, and then see where the complementary areas are and how collaborations could be built. So
sorry, go ahead, Payam.
No, I was just going to say, we're also lucky, Shernaz, we're interviewing her on Monday. So.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, she's been incredible. She's so great at bringing people together and moving things along. She's she's got a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's funny. We did something similar too, where we started doing internal talks for some of our faculty to get 15 minutes, do some layperson talking about their research and stuff. It's been good. It's been good for culture building. You've mentioned collaboration a lot. We talked about it a little while back. I'm curious, is there any like the future of health and healthcare is basically predicated on collaboration now. Like we all really have to work together. Are there any really exciting possible cross collaborations that you'd like to see happen in the future?
Yeah, I think, well, one of our priorities is certainly data science. And analytics and new technologies. So that's with School of Biomedical Engineering and Computer Science. So that's that's kind of at one of our cores that we need to build on. We have built to some extent, but we need to build on more. Another one, I guess, would be, and the wearable technologies are part of that. I think that's really going to take off again, because convenience for the people who are coming for these studies, and of course epidemics like this make it obviously important. And yeah, it's more quantifiable. We don't introduce the subjective bias of one person making an observation at one point in time in a clinic. So another one that we're building on is just working with the community, bringing the community in to be educated in brain health, to avail themselves of programs that are being developed. Silky Cresswell leads the Brain Wellness program, and that's grown tremendously over a year and a half. Again, 26 different programs virtually and over 900 participants. So I think that that's a gold mine for doing sort of cohort studies where you see, who's got what diet and how much exercise, and if you have them attend 10 yoga classes, does that change something, things like that. I think that's important, just lifestyle and prevention, rather than, okay, let's wait till they're really manifesting some disease and see what we can do. It's about healthy lifestyle, and that's obviously very popular many places. And another one is and it's related to that seems to be taking off here, as music and the brain. And so combining with the School of Music and arts, other arts, and how that impacts the brain. And other centers are way ahead of us on that, but we're getting started on that topic. And then, of course, genetics. So if it's not the immune system, if we understood everything about how the immune system interacts with the brain and could target those things, we'd be way ahead in treating brain disorders, where we're really quite far behind other fields like cancer. But another thing is just understanding genetic risk factors. So aside from environment, so I think we need to build on that. We're far behind like the cancer group, where they're just machines of genome sequencing everybody who has a tumor and then personalizing their treatment. We're far from that, but I think we could aspire to getting closer in that regard.
It's great. We're almost at time. Shifting gears from leadership, research, and clinic, just wanted to know, what do you do after all the stuff you do to unwind? What's your mechanism of disconnecting from work?
I like exercise. Biking is one of the main ones, and just walking, and being in nature. I am so glad to be in Vancouver. It is such a beautiful place. I never forget how lucky I am to have moved here. I lived in New York area and Baltimore before coming here, and I would never go back. So that is it's tremendous enjoyment, and just reading, mostly novels, not as much, and gardening. I need more hobbies because I'm working too much, and I need to have something when I stop to keep me occupied, I guess. But, yeah.
That's great.
All right, so then last question, I ask everybody this, is there any particular initiative or project, it can be personal, it can be in your research, that you're really excited about and you think that we all should be excited about too?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess I'm excited about all the different kind of platforms and collaborative projects. Yeah, I don't think I can single out one really. I just, yeah, I have to say, yeah, I guess one would be to really establish a close collaboration between laboratory scientists and our potential for collecting information on human volunteers that don't even have disease, and seeing if we can find markers or biomarkers, things that are changing in the immune system and lifestyle, things that in lifestyle that impact risk for disease, whether it's mental health or brain, neurologic disease, I think is very exciting, but it's a very long-term project. We are starting to put together a platform for imaging, human imaging. We have the biobank, and we need to bring foundational scientists in as well. So there's the beginnings of it and lots of data analytics.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being here. And we look forward to continuing collaboration between the school and the center, and all the best.
Okay, thanks very much. It's a pleasure talking to you.